Well, back in Africa, where Tanzania has barred foreign nationals from owning and operating mainly small-scale businesses, this decision is sparking angry reactions from neighboring Kenya.
What happens when a nation decides to put its citizens first, even if it means tearing at the fabric of regional unity? That is the question East Africa is now facing after Tanzania made a sweeping decision that could redefine how the region does business. On July 24, 2025, the Tanzanian government announced a new directive, Government Notice Number 487A. This wasn't gossip or speculation. It was an official order signed by Trade Minister Salumani Jafo, and it came with teeth. From that day forward, foreigners would no longer be allowed to operate in 15 key areas of the Tanzanian economy. The list isn't limited to obscure corners of the market. It covers the bread and butter of daily trade, wholesale and retail shops, except for big supermarkets, mobile money services, mobile phone repairs, small-scale mining, beauty salons, tour guiding, parcel delivery, even the running of radio and TV stations. In short, the sectors that ordinary people, from Nairobi to Kigali, rely on to make a living. The justification from Tanzania was clear: protect local entrepreneurs. Officials said too many foreigners, including fellow East Africans, were pushing Tanzanians out of their own markets. Complaints had piled up from locals who felt they could no longer compete. Now, with elections looming in October, the government argued that it had a responsibility to prioritize its citizens' livelihoods. To Tanzania, this is not about closing the door on outsiders entirely. In fact, Minister Jafo went out of his way to emphasize that the country is still open for large-scale foreign investment in industries like manufacturing and mining. What Tanzania does not want, he said, is outsiders crowding out locals in the small informal sectors that form the backbone of daily survival. But here's where the storm begins. Tanzania is a member of the East African Community, EAC, a regional bloc built on the promise of free movement of people, goods, and services. Article 13 of the Common Market Protocol explicitly prohibits member states from treating citizens of other EAC countries less favorably than their own. Kenya, in particular, saw Tanzania's move as a direct violation of that agreement. Within days of the announcement, Kenya's Trade Ministry issued a sharp response. Trade Minister Lee Kinyanjui didn't mince words. He warned that the ban undermined the very spirit of regional integration. Kenya, he said, respected Tanzania's right to make domestic policy, but such decisions must be made through consultation, not unilateral bans that cut off livelihoods for thousands of cross-border traders. The numbers underline just how high the stakes are. Tanzania is Kenya's second-largest trading partner within the EAC, after Uganda. In 2024, trade between the two neighbors was valued at roughly 63 billion Kenyan shillings, or about 486 million US dollars. Beyond trade statistics, there are human faces. An estimated 250,000 Kenyans live and work in Tanzania, many of them in the very sectors now restricted. For those Kenyans, Tanzania's ban isn't a policy debate. It's the threat of lost businesses, lost jobs, and an uncertain future. Nairobi has already hinted at possible retaliation if diplomacy fails. Some Kenyan officials are openly talking about mirroring the ban, restricting Tanzanians who operate small-scale mines or retail outlets in Kenya. The tension is unmistakable. What was meant to be a policy protecting Tanzanians has become a test of regional solidarity. Is this economic nationalism dressed up as protectionism? Or is it a necessary step to shield citizens from being squeezed out of their own economy? As the dust begins to settle, two paths are emerging. East Africa could see an escalation of retaliatory bans that fracture the regional market. Or the matter could land in the East African Court of Justice, forcing judges to weigh sovereignty against the obligations of regional treaties. Neither outcome will be simple, and both carry risks that go far beyond Tanzania's borders. For now, the question hangs heavy. Can a nation truly protect its people without undermining the unity it helped build? Tanzania's government has been careful in how it frames this controversial decision. Officials insist that the move is not meant to break East African unity, but to defend Tanzanian citizens from what they describe as unfair competition. Trade Minister Salumani Jafo has been the public face of this defense. His message is simple: The informal and small-scale economy belongs to Tanzanians, and it must remain their safety net. Jaffo pointed to mounting frustrations. Local traders had complained that foreigners, not only from Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda, but also from as far away as China, were dominating the very businesses that ordinary Tanzanians depended on. According to the minister, this encroachment threatened to erode livelihoods and weaken local resilience. By barring foreigners from 15 categories of small business, he argued, the government was giving its people breathing space in sectors they could realistically control. The timing is no coincidence. With elections coming up in October, President Samia Suluhu Hassan's administration faces pressure to show that it stands firmly with ordinary Tanzanians. The ruling party knows that voters are sensitive to bread-and-butter issues, particularly jobs and economic opportunity. A bold step like this ban plays well on the domestic stage, even if it raises eyebrows across the region. Still, critics say Tanzania is trying to walk a tightrope, honoring sovereignty while sidestepping regional obligations. The East African Community's Common Market Protocol was designed precisely to prevent this kind of discrimination. It is supposed to ensure that a Kenyan trader in Dar es Salaam is treated no differently from a Tanzanian in Nairobi. Tanzania's policy, no matter how it is dressed up, directly contradicts that principle. This contradiction has fueled Kenya's anger. Officials in Nairobi have warned that such unilateral moves set a dangerous precedent. If Tanzania can disregard the protocol today, what stops another member from doing the same tomorrow? Kenya's Foreign Affairs Minister Musalia Mudavadi has already highlighted the risks, reminding Tanzania that more than 250,000 Kenyans live and work across the border. Many of them run salons, operate mobile money outlets, or guide tourists. All sectors now restricted. Kenya's frustration is not just about legal obligations, it is also about economics. For years, Kenya and Tanzania have had a delicate but vital trade relationship. Kenya exports goods ranging from manufactured items to agricultural products, while Tanzanians cross into Kenya to supply raw materials and services. Any disruption threatens this balance. Already, voices in Nairobi are calling for reciprocal measures, barring Tanzanians from small-scale mining and retail in Kenya. That prospect has sparked fears of a tit-for-tat trade war. Analysts warn that if the dispute escalates into retaliation, the ordinary citizen will be the first casualty. Prices could rise, jobs could vanish, regional trust could erode. The East African Community, once praised as one of Africa's most promising examples of integration, could lose credibility. Tanzania, however, is not without a strategy. Officials have hinted at possible exemptions for specific sectors tied to tourism or businesses attached to hotels. They have also encouraged foreign investors to look at big-ticket ventures, such as manufacturing, energy, and infrastructure. In other words, the message is, stay out of the informal economy, but if you bring millions in capital, you are welcome. Yet this selective openness only sharpens the criticism. To many, it looks like Tanzania is squeezing out regional neighbors while leaving space for large multinational corporations. That, Kenya argues, undercuts the very principle of regional solidarity. If the informal trader from Kisumu or Kigali cannot operate in Tanzania, why should the multinational from London or Beijing have free rein? Beyond the economic arguments, the matter has become political theater. Tanzanian leaders have framed the ban as an act of sovereignty, proof that the nation will not bow to external pressure. Kenyan leaders, meanwhile, are portraying it as a betrayal of trust, warning that the East African dream is being undermined from within. The next step could determine the future of the bloc. Kenya and other affected states may choose to retaliate, raising the temperature further. Or they may take the matter to the East African Court of Justice, seeking a ruling on whether Tanzania has crossed the legal line. But even that path is uncertain. Tanzania has a history of challenging jurisdiction and exploiting legal loopholes, as seen in past cases like the East African crude oil pipeline dispute. For businesses and ordinary workers across the region, the uncertainty is crippling. Will this ban stand? Will it be reversed? Or will it spark a cycle of retaliation that leaves everyone worse off? What began as a domestic policy move has now evolved into a regional standoff, one that could redraw the lines of East African cooperation. If Kenya and Tanzania cannot resolve this dispute diplomatically, the next battleground will likely be the courtroom. Under the East African Community (EAC) Treaty, disputes between member states can be taken to the East African Court of Justice (EACJ). Kenya has already signaled that this could be an option if talks collapse. On paper, the case looks straightforward. Article 13 of the Common Market Protocol prohibits discrimination against EAC citizens in business and employment. Tanzania's ban, by targeting non-citizens in 15 sectors, clearly lumps Kenyans and other EAC nationals together with outsiders. That, Kenya argues, is a direct breach of treaty obligations. But history suggests the legal fight won't be easy. Tanzania has previously shown skill in using procedural tactics to stall or soften cases. In the 2023 East African crude oil pipeline dispute, for instance, the EACJ avoided ruling on the merits, instead focusing on technicalities. Analysts warn that Tanzania could employ a similar approach here, questioning jurisdiction, exploiting gaps in the treaty, or invoking public interest exceptions to justify its actions. Even if Kenya were to win a favorable ruling, enforcement would be another challenge. The EAC has no strong mechanism to compel compliance. Courts can issue judgments, but member states often decide whether to implement them. That reality underscores a deeper problem. Regional treaties sound powerful on paper, but rely on political will to function in practice. Meanwhile, the political temperature is rising. Kenya's leaders face pressure at home not to appear weak. Civil society groups and business associations have urged Nairobi to defend its traders, even if that means retaliatory restrictions against Tanzanians. On the other side, Tanzania's leaders are under equal pressure to stand firm. Backing down could be seen domestically as surrendering sovereignty. This deadlock poses serious risks. A tit-for-tat trade war would not only hurt small traders, but could spill into other sectors: agriculture, aviation, even cross-border investment. The trust that has been built over decades of integration could unravel quickly. For ordinary East Africans, that could mean higher costs of living, fewer jobs, and renewed resentment between neighboring communities. Beyond the immediate dispute, this clash highlights a larger question. What is the true value of the East African community? If its core protocols can be ignored whenever domestic politics demand it, is the bloc simply a symbolic club rather than a functioning union? For years, the EAC has been praised as a model of African integration. Shared infrastructure projects, joint trade initiatives, and cross-border labor mobility were celebrated as steps toward a stronger, united region. Tanzania's ban has put all of that under a harsh spotlight. There's also the geopolitical angle. Outside powers are watching closely. China, the European Union, and even the United States all have vested interests in East Africa's stability. A fractured EAC could weaken the region's bargaining power on trade and investment, making individual states more vulnerable to external pressure. For Africa as a whole, the fallout could send a warning. Unity is fragile, and economic nationalism still trumps regional ideals when domestic politics are at stake. And yet, there is still room for optimism. Both Kenya and Tanzania have navigated disputes before, from aviation rights to non-tariff barriers, and eventually found compromises. The challenge now is whether leaders can resist the pull of short-term political gain in favor of long-term regional stability. For East Africans, the stakes are clear. Will regional integration survive this storm, or will it collapse under the weight of competing national interests? Will citizens see greater unity or deeper division? The answers will depend not only on politicians, but also on the voices of the people demanding accountability and vision. This is where you, the viewer, come in. The East African story is not written in courtrooms or parliaments alone. It is written in the conversations we have and the choices we make as citizens. So tell us, was Tanzania right to prioritize its citizens, even at the cost of regional commitments? Should Kenya retaliate or pursue diplomacy? And what future do you see for the East African community? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this report insightful, please support our work by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with others who care about Africa's future. Your engagement ensures we can keep bringing you independent, critical, and fact-driven reporting.